couple of quick things. First of all, I was just going to say, we did get word that one of our members has had to resign, and that was John Estock, because he got a full-time job, and so he can't come to the meeting. So now we're going to be looking. So what's going to happen is that Renee, who is the alternate student, is now our full voting student rep. Yeah, and we'll just, if anyone knows anyone who's a student who might be interested in being on the committee, even though it's not a recruitment period right now, let Mary Ann know, and we can see about adding an additional position in. And then I was going to just report on the last board meeting, and there were a couple of things from the last board meeting that I thought were interesting. They did talk about legislative priorities out of Tallahassee and also out of Washington. I'm going to ask Mr. Miller to tell you about that. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting, they talked about the new electric buses, and that there are 2 that are going to be arriving soon, and 2 more that we're going to be getting. So again, if you want to tell us any more about that, my take was, I want to know when, and I want to see them. So and so I think those were the key points from the board meeting. So Mr. Miller, if you wouldn't mind telling us about those other issues.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi. Yeah, so we met, the board met back on April 25th, and did have presentations about what's going on in Tallahassee, or what did happen in Tallahassee, and what's going on in Washington, D.C., which, as you probably know, nothing ever happens in Washington, D.C. The big takeaways from Tallahassee was that 2 main things. One, we didn't get what we asked for, and what we asked for is funding to help us develop what we call an integrated application for your phone. I don't know how many of you have tried out the Transit app, the green Transit app. If you have downloaded that and tried to use that, but that's a app that we promote that has all of our routes and schedule and gets a feed of our real-time information on there. And then the idea that we have is to provide more and more services within that app, so that you can use that to ride the bus. Someday maybe you could even pay for your bus trip right in that app. You could maybe pay for a Uber or a Lyft ride. You could pay for a bike share, a ferry boat when it comes back to Pinellas County. You could, like some other apps you might have, like the Starbucks app or whatever. You might have money put in there, and then, or like your TRAC pass would be in there, and then you could ride the ferry boat for free by showing that app. And we were looking for funding for that the legislature ultimately did not agree to. So we might ask again, but we're still working on that project nevertheless. And we had a good meeting just this last week with the creators of the Transit app when they were here in Tampa for this bus conference that I'll mention. And you'll start seeing in that app some more and more cool things. We have this direct connect program where we're partnering with Uber and taxis, where you can catch a discounted Uber ride or a taxi ride to and from 24 different bus stops all around Pinellas County. They're going to start showing those on the app, and they will suggest ways in which you might get to a destination that's not off the route, that's not right on the route, by taking Uber or a taxi, things like that. And hopefully we talked to them about bike share, putting that in the app, and then the ferry boats. Washington, D.C. was actually, surprisingly, actually a better story. Despite President Trump's, the Trump administration's proposal to dramatically reduce funding for public transportation, which we rely on, mostly for our capital program, meaning to buy new buses. The Trump administration was proposing to reduce that and totally eliminate the funding that need to run the Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit project we're working on, Congress completely rejected that idea. And there was bipartisan support in Congress toward not only keeping all the transit funding, but actually increasing it dramatically. That happened right at the end of March. And I think PSTA, maybe this is dumb thinking, but I think we had a little bit to do with that. We have been spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C. advocating, talking about how important public transit is and how we need more buses and we need Central Avenue BRT. And there are some influential congressmen and senators from Florida that have heard us and want to help us out. And that, I think, was a key component. So that was one of the main items in the meeting. The other item at the board meeting was that we approved buying 2 more electric, all battery-powered buses to add 100% to the 2 additional that we had already bought that are hopefully going to be arriving here in Pinellas County in the month of May. I hope. Is that right here? I don't know if we have an update on where those might be. They have to drive from California, or they have to be driven from California because there's not battery charging stations all across our country yet. Someday it might happen, but they are being built by this company called BYD in California, and the first 2 electric, all battery-powered buses, certainly south of Tallahassee in the United States, will be here later this month. The goal is to put those first 2 on a new and improved looper in downtown St. Petersburg. The current looper runs with only 2 trolleys, and so soon it will run with 4 vehicles, trolleys and these electric, all-electric buses. The electric buses are pretty neat. They, of course, have 0 emissions, and they are perfectly quiet because they're battery-powered, and they don't have a combustible engine in them. Other than that, they are pretty much like the rest of our buses. They apparently have the most amazing Indy 500-like pickup, so the drivers have to be trained not to floor it because that would not be safe. Because it's an electric motor, not a diesel engine. PSTA has a plan for purchasing additional electric buses into the future. We're going to be applying for a number of different grants for those. There's a thing called the VW, Volkswagen Settlement. You guys probably have heard of the fact that Volkswagen did some illegal stuff where they doctored information about their diesel cars illegally, and they had paid an enormous settlement of billions of dollars to the federal government, who's now doled it out to the states. And each state has to come up with ways in which they can amend for Volkswagen's sins of polluting the air by funding electric vehicles. And we're actually going to be partnering with Duke Energy to make application for more electric buses from even that source of funding. The other main thing that occurred over the last week at PSTA, which we highlighted at the board meeting in advance, but we were the host of what's known as the International Bus Rodeo. This is the best bus drivers from around America and Canada and even Mexico, North America, all came here to PSTA's facilities last weekend. In addition, then, there was the annual APTA bus conference held at the Marriott over in downtown Tampa at the same time. But here at PSTA, we had 1,400 people here on Sunday, a week ago Sunday, with a big, huge tent. We hired a wedding coordinator that had built us a huge tent, and we had food for all these people. They brought all these bus drivers and mechanics from every possible transit system. You'd see they would wear their shirts and their uniforms, and they'd be like San Antonio or even Hawaii. The Hawaiian transit system came here. We had our own group in there. It was a huge success, and everyone we got very positive reviews from everybody about PSTA, the facility, the competition, just being down here for the people from the north, the warmth, very, very positive. Another positive result was that our bus driver, who was in the competition, he came in 4th place, which was pretty neat. They had a banquet on Tuesday night where they announced all the winners, and of course, kind of like the Kentucky Derby, he just came just outside of the showing in 4th, but he came in 4th, which is really pretty neat. To be the 4th best bus driver in America, or in North America. So it was a pretty exciting week for PSTA, the board meeting, and then the rodeo.
Thank you very much. Interesting stuff. Good. All right. Moving forward then, on our agenda, the next item is the Forward Pinellas report, but we don't have our Forward Pinellas rep here, and also there is not a meeting until later this month, and so there's nothing to report on that. The first action item we have is the approval of the minutes from our April 17th meeting. Have all of you had a chance to review the minutes, and are there any changes, corrections, additions?
My name isn't in there.
Oh, it's not.
So sorry.
Marianne?
I
Okay,
will
thank you.
amend this.
She'll amend that. Okay, any other changes, corrections? If not, then I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes with the correction of adding Mark in.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, David. And a second?
Second.
Mark will second. All in favor?
No.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, the first information item we have is an update on the Flamingo Fair beta test from Michael Hansen and Expressa.
Madam Chair, if I could just
Yes,
quickly add one additional amazing highlight
Yes, sir.
that happened last week. One of the federal programs that we were successful at receiving was a sandbox program to provide really the first time ever real-time options for our DART system. Right now, generally you have to call the day before to make a reservation to ride our DART system. Meaning, and the DART system is for people that have a disability that makes them so they cannot ride the regular bus. And so the Sandbox program, the grant program that we got, is creating a software package that allows us to use to make real-time reservations so that you can call up right away and then we'll immediately dispatch a care ride vehicle, or in the future a Lyft or taxi vehicle to come pick you up, like other folks can do. And we have some historical people in our midst here that have taken some of the first rides ever in that way. Kim and Gloria and Elizabeth, I think you both.
Well,
Yes.
wasn't able to take part that day. I want to. We will.
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Did you do it?
I did,
now?
yes.
Oh, you did. Okay,
I did.
so two of you
Yes.
did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
No problem. I have the
Went
phone out,
swimmingly.
fish on my phone now too.
Oh, you do?
Oh, that's
Excellent.
great.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you guys are still, groundbreakers, and we're going to be expanding the program now over time to have more and more, ultimately it'll be a permanent program.
Yeah, that sounds excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
That's
Thank
cool.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and it's interesting because we are the groundbreakers and the beta testers of all kinds of things, and so the next point is the Flamingo Fair. They're there.
Beta testing.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're beta testing that too. Hello.
Hi. Good afternoon, TRAC members. My name is Michael Hansen. I'm the Director of Finance.
Good afternoon. My name is Presla Senku, and I am the Manager of Revenue and Capital Project Accounting.
Today we're bringing to you an information item to discuss feedback on our Flamingo Fares deployment testing, which began April 12, 2018. To date, we have issued approximately 50 cars to deployment testers and we've received lots of valuable feedback.
In the month of April, we had 765 flamingo tabs recorded in the system. This number steadily increased throughout the month of April, and so far in May, from May 1st through the 13th, we have 650 tabs in the system. The testers, including TRAC members who participate in this testing phase, have helped us test the system, like web functionality, testing the validators on buses, testing the back office and how tabs translate into the back office, testing the revenue and ridership reports, and testing the Flamingo card itself, how to replace and block the card after it's lost.
We would just like to take this opportunity to thank all the TRAC members who have helped us with all this valuable feedback that we received. And we would like to take a few minutes to open it up to any questions or feedback that you can offer us and your experience with Flamingo Fairs.
I know there were some questions, or Elizabeth, did you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, Elizabeth has a question.
I'm searching for the email where there's supposed to be a special credit card number so you can sign up.
She hasn't
register that.
activated yet.
The last interaction I had was, it kept trying to hook me up to Hart in Tampa. I said, no, that doesn't work. I finally gave up. It said, and then I kept getting emails, you need to finish, and I try again, and they kept telling me, you need to finish. And then when I look it up and get the Flamingo, I get the older version because his is red, John's is red, and mine is pale, no fancy color.
Is
So
that the mobile application?
Yeah, the
mobile
mobile app.
application isn't yet available to
Okay.
testers.
So he must have downloaded on the real thing, but on his phone. And it wasn't the phone app.
Currently, we have Flamingo mobile app, which is in the pilot phase. And it's a flash pass to the bus operators, and people can go today and purchase Flamingo Pass and show it to the bus drivers and ride. But that's in the pilot phase program, and it's not for beta testing. Okay. In the next couple of months, we should receive the mobile application to test our system. So that's a different application. But
Okay,
for
that
now,
makes sense.
our beta testers are only testing with the Flamingo physical card.
But I don't have a laptop at home unless I go to the library, so I have to wait until the phone app comes out.
You should be able to,
You can't go online on the phone,
You
like
should-
to a.
No, I tried, but it
you
didn't
should be able to use a mobile browser on your phone
Yeah.
Yes,
to get to the website.
but it was somebody said it was an older version.
And after this meeting, I will be glad to help you set up the account, and we
Okay,
will
thank you.
get the confirmation email and set up the payment type
Thank you.
and get you
Beautiful.
started with Flamingo.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So those are my two questions.
Okay. Well, Richard, did you need help with, you were saying with setting yours up as well?
Maybe afterwards.
Afterwards, same thing with them, okay. Other questions? I have a couple, but.
I just have
Yeah,
one.
Mark.
I ran into a situation where the tester was off, and I had to use my traditional pass. How is that going to work in the future when traditional passes are phased out and we don't have another way of paying? And we don't carry cash, and the reader is just off.
Well, this is a testing phase, and
Mhm.
that's why we would like to make sure that 100% of the fleet is working before we deploy this project or the Flamingo Smart Card. So your feedback is valuable to us to let us know which routes are not working or which buses have validators who say out of service, and it's our responsibility to make sure we fix 100% of the validators so we can have a successful launch.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Like, I've had situations where, the transaction's denied on the Flamingo, and the bus drivers are sort of mixed between just waving you on and not asking you to swipe a regular pass, or asking you to do so. I mean, is there any policy on whether you should be swiping if if the reader is on, but just says transaction denied.
Okay, so we have advised our bus operators, because there is only limited amount of cards that we have distributed to our testers, and we understand that some validators will not be working for some reason, or the payment won't be accepted, but we have told our bus operators to let the passenger go if they show the Flamingo card. So I don't believe you should have a problem, but we have another training session with our bus operators to make sure they understand that testers will go through and will be able to ride even if there is an issue with the card or the validator.
Questions? My questions. Okay. Training. What are your plans for how you will train? I mean, I figured out how to use it. I wasn't sticking it in the right spot, and then eventually one driver and I sort of figured, oh, you do go where the dot is and stuff like that. But the drivers also, several of them have said that they didn't think that they were turned on yet. They didn't know anything about it. What's the training plans for riders and for drivers?
Well, we have plans to train the bus operators, just to, we have a bus in a box, basically a validator that will be available in the training room, and we will make sure each bus operators knows what to expect after each tap. And then our marketing department is working on creating the videos for our riders, so we can educate the riders on the how to tap and how fare capping works and all that fun stuff that Flamingo is bringing.
And how long is the test going to be running? How long are you planning to do the beta test?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we started April 12th, and it's going to run for at least an additional month. We're still waiting on further deployment testing details from our vendor, but the test will continue for at least another month.
At least another month, okay. And then, like, I know I sent you emails when I had some questions. Is that how you want us to let you know when we discover things, or like when there's one that doesn't work or so forth? I mean, how are you gathering data from us as testers? Is that it, email?
Yes, email is the best way to contact us. I think you were directed to send the emails to the vendor directly, which is beta testing at init. But I can get with you after the meeting, and you can send the emails directly to PSTA, but I think the directions were for the communication to go through the vendor first, and then.
And so that's what you prefer, that we go through the vendor first?
That's what we prefer, because
Yes.
they're distributing the questions to Harvard PSTA, depending
Okay.
on which system the question pertains to.
All right, we need to make sure, I need to make sure I even have their email address too, so if you have that at the end of the meeting, make sure everybody who's tester, if you want to have it.
Isn't there there's a link on the
link on the
website
website.
to report bugs?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then ultimately is the goal that after you've tested this, are you gonna roll it out for us personally type of thing if we want to continue to use it after this, or is it gonna be a sort of a fresh thing when we're done?
After deployment testing, we'll go into revenue testing, where we'll open it up to more users, and we'll actually take payment methods, not just the
From all of
phone
them.
and credit cards used, but actual payment methods.
And then I had another question, and I noticed, I was like looking for, let me try this, let me see if there's a way I can go to Hillsborough or Pasco, and I thought, there's a route that goes across the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, but that goes to Manatee, and Manatee's not on this test?
No,
They're not, is there a plan to get them on the, so basically, we can't, I was thinking, the only way I know to get to Sarasota is through Manatee.
Right. Yeah.
Is that right? Okay, so I wasn't reading that wrong, all right, okay. All right, so that's not one of my choices right now. Okay, I think those were my questions. Anyone else? Yes, go
I
ahead.
don't have a question, but I just want to say my every transaction has been really smooth, so I've been lucky. I'm glad you guys got all the bugs and not me. And I want to say thank you, because whatever has been working really well for me, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. I agree with Corey too. Because in fact, I said at the board meeting, that I now view this as being some pass for my body. And I just get on the bus and I go zap and it's good. So it's really easy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for all of the questions, and thank you so much for your feedback. And we value your feedback because that will make our project a success. And like I said, the mobile app, or Michael said, mobile app is coming soon. So in the next couple of months, you as registered testers, you will receive a notification when it's available.
And so then the mobile app will be instead of the card ultimately, so that you have it, so that you just swipe your phone to
There will be a QR code on the mobile app, and underneath the reader, you're tapping in front of the reader. Underneath the reader, there's a barcode reader that you can hold your phone under to get it to read the
once
QR
it's
code.
activated. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay. And then our next information item is Juan Ludian is going to report on the status of our working group that I think a lot of you were involved in the initial ideas for that, and then we had one session.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Juan Lubian, the Community Engagement Liaison here at PSTA. And last month, several TRAC members stayed after the TRAC meeting, and they participated in our workshop. There was a lot of ideas rolling out, and we ended up with a list of about 15 possible PSTA improvements. Now, off of those improvements, what we want to do is we want to review them, we want to discuss them, and we hope to narrow it down to about 2 improvements. And I know this might get a little hard just because we want to improve several things, but we're going to narrow it down to 2, and that will be our focus over this year. Now, something that we are going to do is PSTA staff will meet with the departments who are in charge of possibly making changes to these improvements, and then we will come back to the TRAC meeting and decide what we want to do or how we want to move forward with the possible improvements. Now, after this TRAC meeting, we will answer any questions any TRAC members have, and we also want to extend an invitation for anyone who wants to participate in the second workshop.
No, it's been really good working with Juan and Nicole. Have I know I've spoken with them a few times even after the meeting, and there were some really good ideas, and we're trying to figure out which are things that we can do quickly and easily and inexpensively as possible, and what are some things that the PSTA can just do over time, but hopefully there will be 2 really meaty projects that we ultimately decide on that will make sure would happen in this calendar year. So it's a process.
Yes.
But you all have been excellent in overseeing this and making it work. And again, everyone is invited, and not just the people that signed up. Anyone who wants to stick around, since we're going to be very possibly ending earlier tonight because we have a fairly light agenda. If anyone can stick around for a while, that would be great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for the information items. At this point, we would have member comments, and so I would ask any of you who have a comment that you'd like to make relative to ridership, relative to anything we're doing right now. Quiet group today. Okay. Well, then I believe that's pretty much it for today then. I will adjourn the meeting. Our next meeting will be on June 19th, and I look forward to seeing you. What, I'm sorry.
3-minute break before you start your
Yes,
workshop?
yeah, we'll take like a 3 to 5 minute break too. Then we'll start on the initiative meeting. Okay? Thank you all.
Also, anyone who has questions for Stressa and Mike, you can do it now.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Any questions for the workshop?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's it.
There you go, early night.
Yeah, it is early. This is the earliest we've ever been able to adjourn. This is great, thank you.
Right, we don't. Like, I don't know. Okay. Okay, let me see if I can get some. Yeah. You mentioned that. We don't usually take things up. I know. It's a different, yes.
Well, you need to upgrade your, yeah, hundreds of dollars, right, so two things, they're happy to upgrade.
This is it,
Have you noticed that? I know.
I try to-
And it's Google apps that I'm not interested in, stuff I'm not.
But that seems to be.
Is that something you've seen?
Well, yeah.
Is that right?
No, I have.
It's the same one that.
Oh.
They still want me to upgrade as
Yeah.
well.
It's just the next slide.
And I won't pass it out.
Google.
No, it's not.
Yes, I've seen it.
But my point was that.
Yes, for sure, I've seen it, yes.
I-
You're welcome, thank you.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I just saw this. Oh, this. That just showed up. It showed up.
Then I.
The logo is black and red. But black, the colors of the mirror look like are black, yellow, and red. It doesn't have to be black and yellow on this. If you go online, there's actually a recipe on how to make black-eyed Susan cookies. But all they are cut out cookies with a black lacquer center. We drink the black-eyed Susans. The party goes from 2 until 7:38, but the big race is at 6:45. Yeah. We'll be gambling all the races beforehand.
Yes. Like the waitress that comes over, how's everything?
Yeah.
Your mom's well. Every time.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, that too, but that's.
Okay.
It's up here, so it's
Right.
not right at my work.
Then they're back home on Saturday. Oh. Yeah. To go home. Oh, okay, I got you. Well, don't forget, it probably will because this is on NBC. They won't interrupt the Preakness. If anything, the game started at 7. No. The Preakness goes off NBC at 7:15.
I got the pedometer.
Oh, okay.
So you can fly out of my house as soon as it is.
Yeah, but trust me.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm not, okay?
Yeah.
I'm still looking at it.
I thought you were going to tell me that you couldn't, that you were going to the game again. No. Most people fly out after the party's over.
2 miles. I've been doing 5 miles a day, but at work, so I can't do it right now. But again, it's one of those things that it has to be.
You're playing the old
I
Ovechkins.
know,
Good
I'm
night.
like, even, that's why I'm glad, just fancy ones aren't waterproof.
Think about being tempted by them.
I wonder how they measure the thing, that I don't know.
You have to set, I know you were the length of the wall, but.
No, I watched the. I haven't really watched the game, the Lightning this year yet. If they make it to the Cup, I will.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay.
That's how they measure.
I've been watching.
Thank you.
I've been watching my Yankees.
I had to measure my stride.
Are
Yeah, it would
they
be.
though?
So yeah, it doesn't
It takes a lot.
I don't know why.
Well, yeah, you got what's his face, Tebow.
Well, the average is 10,000. It's 5 miles.
Yeah.
Mine's like, but you know, they're good. I love it. I'm glad I'm only doing that part.
So that's basically what I think this is,
Yes, I've seen
at least
it
from my
before.
perspective, more about
I like that.
this example.
Okay, no, no,
Pretty good for that. Yeah, but that's benefits when you hang on with it while you're training for it. The benefits.
Good, how are you?
Next outing.
When's my next what?
Outing.
Where I'm gonna be doing for work? Or,
Pressure. Yes. Joey, you're gonna notice.
Pretty much.
Your arms and everything else. Oh, that's wonderful. Looking forward to it.
We love it.
Ooh, I get two.
Here, let me show you.
Here.
Oh, no, come back over here in a second, I'll pull it up.
I'm not supposed to say that. Let her say that. She's real special, right?
Hi Theo, thanks for coming.
You want me to go individually?
No, you know what, no, not one by one, I'm just gonna pass it down my end, you don't have to take it. Ready?
No, I feel it's great. I'm so glad when I hear you.
I'll pass it back for this one.
Here's another idea.
I thought they were coming, I didn't.
Like I'd seen cupcakes.
still looking for an email from Flamingo.
Yeah, but this, just, yeah, this, like I just. Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, you don't have to write anything.
Okay.
Yeah, what happened was, but that's why we had to find it. I didn't see anymore.
You don't know what the
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Remember your handbook?
I'm gonna get down on.
So you volunteer.
I sent the report, I said I'm gonna email you.
Oh, you didn't get it?
Oh, we wanna make sure
I
that.
did, I confirmed and created an account, so we were emailing them, I'm gonna get it.
Oh, that's what it is.
And I'm gonna wait.
Okay, just flag it before she goes.
Well, either way, that's a lot.
Okay, well, let's make sure you get feedback.
Right,
Good,
that would be nice.
I mean, it's very to be, presenting to like, conference.
I'm gonna hit it. Yeah, I thought it was on. I made them measure my pool. Where I live, it's 3 pools, and I made them measure it because nobody knew that. I needed to know. I want to know when I'm in my pool. I don't want to keep willy-nilly back and forth, but I'm not.
Hey, listen, got to program. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause there's so much already going on.
Ever. I mean, that's, would that be how you found the, the website?
Well,
Oh,
I highlighted it, I copied the entire.
All right, we'll do it next month.
It's gonna have to be in June. In June, we're gonna have the final agreement on it. No,
This part we're gonna do.
Not even just stand in a pool, but trying, even though it's not.
Yeah, with the water.
So he's gonna fake it out.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Although he's got a cap for like really stupid
I'm sorry, but.
I love that. Look like Esther Williams.
I made some of those yesterday.
Fun, the thing is,
Yes.
as long as it's.
So I was bad too.
That's good. Okay, if it's next time comes a chore. It's taken off. I can't remember why, I'm trying to.
Yeah, definitely let's have it next month then.
Yeah, we're not back.
And hopefully, yeah, we hopefully we can like sort of do stuff in advance on it so that.
And that's how we order it. Yeah, maybe that was it, they have to ask.
Well, public sector
Tell them
cookies
they're
that
asking.
anyone does.
No.
The committee's asking for a good marketing plan. What are they doing relative to business, community, chambers of commerce, and I don't mind helping out. You know, no matter what I do.
Oh, no, I was just gonna.
Oh, thank you, great, that was before, so.
Maybe they've got a plan for it, that's what we're going with.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And I was.
Thank you.
Would you like to close it before the workshop?
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I won't. I did.
Well, I know you. Yes.
I'm so proud.
I never, I mean.
I was there for the,
I know, that was coincident, it was a.
Fantastic Day, Awesomeness Day.
Oh, awesome.
Well, very nice.
I was there.
You're right,
I
Gateway?
just wanna make sure that.
I was here.
Oh,
Yeah, we're like,
pardon.
let's-
Okay, well, I'm ours, I think we're ready.
We're ready?
There you are.
Yeah, the police officer said, are you going to finish? Yeah. We're doing. It was fun.
Oh, goody, I can bring him on.
Okay, is everyone ready?
Yes, we should.
All right.
Okay. All right.
If you haven't done so yet, make sure you sign in the sign-up sheet. And it lets us know who was here. But I think on the last workshop, we ended up on a good note. We talked about certain things that we wanted to see improve. We had a lot of ideas, and all of those ideas are now separated into 3 different buckets, and you'll see it on your PowerPoint slides. We have writer communication, and some of those ideas that you talked about were maybe having a Why I Ride PSTA campaign, social media campaign, We Are Writers, improve communications to non-English speakers, how to ride, maybe having a how to ride guide, maybe just having a how to ride presentation, learning what PSTA staff does, what they present out in the public. So maybe just having that and one of your regular track meetings. Detours, maybe communicating that better to our riders, or maybe that's just a general process in which PSTA can improve on. Message boards, behind the driver's notice, and rider referral programs. So all of these will help improve rider communication. On the other bucket, we have service and accessibility improvements, destination signs, our front marquees. I know that maybe some of the destinations that we currently have are not something that makes sense to our riders, so that's something that someone said. Dark cost, bike racks, ramp and wheelchair awareness, hub-to-hub express, and then all the way to the right we have amenities and enhancements, clean shelters, visibilities of bus stops. And when we go a little bit more in depth, we want to make sure what type of financial impact this is going to have on PSTA. Like some of them might not have a huge financial impact, and others might. Others might take a lot more time to implement, whether it's here at PSTA or it's something that we develop as a new program. So when we review these, we're going to keep that in mind, so that when we come up with our top 2, because that's what we're going to do today, we want to make sure that off of these 15 PSTA improvements, we narrow it down to just 2. And when we're thinking about those 2, we want to make sure that, is this going to have a huge financial impact on PSTA? Is it going to take a long time? Is it going to take longer than 5 months? I know some of you think or want to accomplish one of these goals before the end of December. So is that something that you want to do, or is it more of a process that you want to initiate that might take a little bit longer than that?
So when I saw these, I thought they were all really good ideas and really good that we could, any one of these we could take to our departments that run these and say, okay, here's a general comment from our committee. But I think what we want to do today is ask you all, of the ones that you came up with, what are the ones that you want to take a deeper dive with, right? So we're going to take all of the comments and sort of give them to maintenance or amenities or operations, and they'll put them into their plans, right? But what do you want to have more information on? So maybe it's clean shelters, like what do we do now? What's even our contracts right now? What can we do to improve the cleanliness of shelters within the existing contract, or maybe what we should ask for in our next contract, right? And you can kind of get more information about what's happening and put it in front of the whole committee. Like, we could have Henry come and talk about that, or have Henry come and talk about bike racks. Like, what bike racks do we use right now? Why are they at the front of the bus? What are other options, national best practices for bike racks? And what are the ways that we can, increase bike racks? So there's a little bit of more information, a deeper dive, and then the next part would be maybe if there's some choices, the committee could make recommendations to PSTA on those choices. Right? I mean, and that would, to me, that would be an accomplishment if you all said, well, I want you to buy 14 position bike racks. They don't exist, right? And you say, right? And we said, okay, well, we'll thank you for the plan of us to get 14 position bike racks, and we'll figure out how to put that into our budget. Or we would like more, like flashing lights at bus stops. Then we would then help you create like a
Plan for that?
We would take the time to develop a process for deciding which bus stops got those, right? So in this way, we're sort of we're treating you like the board, right? So the board brings us a particular issue. Somebody's got a pet project, and what happens is it goes to staff, and staff develops an action plan, and then the board responds to that action plan, and then we budget that action plan, right? And so the same thing here. What of these are your projects that you want staff to spend their time on? Then we can go back and forth with you to develop what that plan is to implement and what we would ultimately implement. And sometimes you then agree on what to be implemented, and then sometimes you don't, and the process continues. But I want you to know that if the end of the year you get to a staff plan for the implementation of one of these things, that is still influence and success, even if we haven't put a single flashing light out yet. It becomes part of our long-term plan, and you've influenced the agency, right?
Yes.
Well, it's interesting, one of the other things that I was thinking, and as you were describing those things, one of the thoughts I had was the whole issue of what do we want as a group in terms of, do we want to decide on something that makes life easier for all PSTA riders based on our experiences, or is it information for us to make all of us better riders, or ways in which that can then be communicated to riders to make them better riders? It's kind of a looking in versus a looking out too. I guess that was one of the things, and also, like Juan mentioned earlier when we talked about, some of the how to ride things, I was like, well, in that case, I would love to have them come and give a how to ride presentation at one of our meetings, because all of us learn to ride probably without having learned what the official ways are to do things, and it may be a good way for us to have a big interaction with customer service, so that you will hear what we as riders have experienced. So, a couple different ways of looking at it. So does anyone have any thoughts on what do you want to achieve from this? Not just a specific item, but how we evaluate the items that we're trying to choose between.
Well, I think if it's something that we're already doing, that PSTA is already doing, it may not be something we need to dive deeper into. For example, PSTA started using an email system, and I'm getting detour test messages, test emails.
Are you getting that now?
Yeah. So I guess that's something we brought up here, and all of a sudden it started happening. So,
See, already
you're
yeah.
the magic is already happening. So, I mean, I'm not sure if that's something that we need to dive deeper into. Maybe we need to dive deeper
I just want to
into.
learn that one. I didn't know how did you sign up for that?
I have no idea. Somehow, like, the PSTA has my email, and I'm getting
I would
updates.
love to know how that.
It's only a test phase
Are
right
you
now,
on
but
it?
I got one today. Did you get it?
No.
No?
We
Okay.
have to figure that out, where it's coming from. Did it say?
You're gonna be looking at my deleted folder, aren't you?
Please look in your deleted.
Yeah, hold
folder.
on, because I just deleted.
And did it
Oh, you
come-
know what? I deleted the deleted folder when I left.
Well, we'll investigate.
Yeah.
Because, I mean,
It might be the email that's in.
is it operation?
It says
Marketing?
info. I think it's info@psta.net. I think.
Okay. We'll find out.
Well,
That's fine.
regardless,
But I'm
we're
trying,
gonna
the point I
have-
was trying to get at is, I think that we need to, when we're picking what we want to dive deeper into, it has to be something not necessarily new and groundbreaking, but what's going to help move the organization forward as a whole.
Well,
Okay.
and to your point, it
Mhm.
could be something that we're doing
Right.
that we're not communicating well enough.
That could be true too.
So, I mean, what you're bringing up is you're getting a piece of information and others aren't. So others are wondering, do they need to opt in? Do we
Right.
need to market this more? Like, so there is still a conversation there, even though it's,
Well, two of the bullet points right here are communications,
right.
improving communications. And a few of them could be rolled into the social media too.
Well, now let's take it out of the tactic of a social media and say, what is it, what's the information piece that you want? So when we go to the marketing department, we say, our riders are telling us they don't get enough information about detours, right? They don't get enough information about service changes. Then I think the process by which we, the committee, investigate that is, okay, let's bring Cindy in and say, Cindy, give us a presentation on how you communicate these things and what's your strategy for communication and what are the tactics that you use for communication. And then you can tell her, well, I don't get those. I don't see how I interact with that. How can we improve how you're even telling people that you're doing this, right? But it becomes something that we can talk about in a very specific way, then she can then translate that to another potential information issue, right? But if we talk about something very specific, then there's very specific action items that can take place first, and we can say, yes, we've achieved that, now let's move on to the next thing.
So
Makes sense?
communications being a factor for so many of these bullet points.
Right, but I think if we say, come and talk to us about your entire communication, then you won't affect the change that you're looking for because
Right.
it'll be too broad.
Right.
The one thing I'm very keen on is both the detours communication under the rider communication bucket and then the destination sign, front marquee, and the detours. Those are two slightly separate things, but I think that they are both tools, that both incredibly useful when you're standing there waiting, you're like, the board isn't updating. Do I have something in my email to have the front marquee is useful, but then
So what is the
An excellent
system
point.
for detour?
Right, well, it's how do we communicate service changes, specifically detours, to our riders? And let's say, so how would I create an action plan for this? Say, one, go talk to Cindy, go talk to, in marketing, go talk to Jeff in transportation. What do we need to make a presentation to the TRAC about what we do in marketing and what we do in transportation and how this happens. Maybe we'll find when we start looking at this stuff, we'll find something that's missing. Hey, wait a minute, this doesn't exist. Or maybe we're presenting and you all come up with an idea and say, well, what about this and what about that, and how do you make that joint decision, right? And just ask questions about what happens in the background as what you're seeing is or is not showing all the work that's happening in the background. So if that's something that you want to pull out of those two buckets and say, yeah, let's talk about that, because it has a marketing or communications component, and then it has a rider information operations component, right?
In fact, I just wrote down, I said, how do I get information? That is, that's exactly right. There's a marketing thing. How's it being communicated? But how do we act? And that was one of the things I mentioned to you, Juan, is if I'm a new rider, or even if I'm an existing rider, what are the systems that we ought to be using to get that information that some of them already exist that we don't know exist.
Yes.
So, and it's good for you all to know what's confusing us as riders, too.
Yes, and that's
and that's for Cindy as well.
Right, so the success or like the achievement of the track could be getting staff to develop a process for internal, external communication on detours, something that's written down, because I don't know if we have anything written down.
Yeah, that all funnels down to the
Right.
rider that needs the information.
I like that one because I think that one particular idea has implications for a whole lot of other stuff, but if we concentrate on that one, it may in fact by default make it just simply better for us to, make the website work a little bit better, make the all the communication work better, because we're looking at detour as an individual item, but then that helps me on Tuesday when I'm at Park Street Terminal and I need to go to someplace else, what's the best way to do it? Well, now that we've improved.
So what is that?
communication-
So it's improving detour communication, but involves
But it's
marketing.
specific, it's measurable, it's
Smart goal.
achievable, right?
It's a smart goal. Yes.
Well, in fact, that's, we've sort of like used pieces to bring something together, and I like that idea personally. Are there some others like that? Because in the end of today, we want to pick like 2 items, and that, to me, one item is communication of detours, like we just sort of
And this has
fleshed that out.
It has a huge impact not only at PSTA but also for our riders. I mean, how many of you have been out there waiting for the bus, but it's not there because there's a gas leak 3 blocks down, and you don't know, and you've been out there for a couple of minutes, and the bus is not going to come. So, being able to receive that information in whatever shape or form you get it, I think is very important.
By the way, that has relevance also to connector buses, which I try to avoid because they're not supposed to change their routes when they do a diversion, but they do. And there are times when you're at a stop and you don't know for sure if the connector is going to come by at all. So I think, again, that has implications for that. That's a detour of the connector.
Right, so we could, if that's the one you choose, we'll create an action plan for the committee.
Well, and that's one option.
Right.
What are, because in the end, let's vote on, let's have a couple to vote on, so.
Well, it's a consensus, remember, we can't vote.
Yeah,
Don't
okay,
vote, yeah.
but
All right.
nevertheless, and so, how about another one? I mean, from what we have up there, what's another sort of favorite thought?
Yeah, what would make it easier for you guys when you're out there on the road? Just think about the struggles sometimes that you have. So if you were out there saying, "Oh man, I wish PSTA had this," or "I wish PSTA would do this differently."
Clean up the shelters.
Clean up the shelters.
Well, that came from Sue. Sue, thank goodness.
Is that your thing, Sue?
Well, I'd seen on next door that it was going out as a blast, that there was an issue and everything, and that is concerning.
Yeah.
So in this case, in clean shelters, what we could do is bring Henry and his maintenance team to tell you what we do to clean the shelters, how often we clean the shelters, what our contracts are for vendors to clean the shelters. And then also communications. How do we?
It all comes back to that, doesn't it?
It does too. How do people report issues with shelters?
Exactly.
And then what happens when they report issues for shelters, right? So we can have somebody from the county come talk about see-click fix.
That's where
Right.
this came from.
Right,
I mean, it was
see-click
just,
fix.
yeah.
Right, so if you see something around the county,
It's
you
the city,
can-
isn't it? Or is the county?
It's the county.
That's the county.
And city of St. Pete.
And you take a picture of it and you tell them what it is, then they'll send it to the appropriate
And
department.
it geolocates from your picture, or you can put in physically the address or whatever. so they know what department, you have to do categories, what department it goes to, and then it's acknowledged and followed up on, and you can follow it online.
Wow, I did not know that that existed. That's very interesting. I mean,
Everything
that-
from potholes to you
Yes.
name it,
Yes.
dog barking.
Yeah, see, again, that seems like the kind of thing where a small presentation for the track would be, I'm sure,
Mhm.
helpful for all of us, but.
So we
that's-
could do that, right, so that's another idea
Down shelter.
in terms of, in the context of what the committee wants to do is affect change to make the shelters cleaner. We can find out what resources we already have available, and then how do we use them better,
Okay.
right?
One thing I can add, and one, you brought this up, because budget is so important to this, and it obviously has to be something that is not gonna be an extraordinary expense at the PSTA.
Can you tell we're in budget season?
But I think it was Juan or Rob, I can't remember who said it, but, there's a certain allotment that they have to clean these shelters. However, some of the locations are very nice and very clean. If we can identify, or amenities or whoever can identify the ones that are very bad, like the one that you had, then just kind of shift the funding, if some is always clean, shift the funds that would normally go just to clean all of them, to get at the
The
really
problem
bad,
children.
the problem ones.
Well, but I think that.
I don't know if that can be done.
In the context of the committee project,
Mm.
we can say, what resources do we have available? How can we use them better? What are some easy, quick fixes that we can make, right?
Mm.
And what things might we have to budget for, right? And so we can put that incremental action step in as part of this committee's work and say, this is what we're gonna do now, and this is what we're gonna think about how to do if we had more funding. But I think that that's part of the end of your project, it's the recommendations out of the project, and then we can start to implement those recommendations.
Here's one that I remember was on the original list, and I don't know how it got modified or whether it came off the list, but we had talked about driver communication, and then I know Richard and I just had a conversation about that too. A couple years ago, we had a presentation of the drivers. The day in the life of a driver, we had a driver come in and stuff like that. And as we're talking about shelters as an issue and stuff like that, I don't know if this is a new item, and if it is, then we don't have to do it, but I thought the idea of driver interaction and what does the driver see from us as riders? What are the things we should be asking for from drivers? How do we report good drivers? And we keep asking about that. And so I don't know if that's one of the issues, but I know we had originally had it on the list, but it's off, so.
It's,
I'm not gonna
in
let
with the
you
how
wait,
to.
hang on, Sven. I'm not letting you wait on that one. If you want to report a good driver, call the info line, email us, engage@psta.net, info@psta.net for.
Communicate.
Yeah.
We don't know the name.
Don't wait.
I mean, I've
You don't
done
need-
that. I've asked the name of the driver from time to time, and I don't always remember that, okay, it was the 67 at 9:20 by stop such and such. I just wish there was that this is driver number 237, or this is Bill J, that kind of thing, and then I can call in and say, driver 237 or Bill J was absolutely fabulous.
Well, so, we don't do this, but I rode the Heart bus to the air show this weekend, and they have scrolling across the front, the operator number and the bus, and there's the bus number there too. So I had a driver that was really great, and I sent an email there was no sign up there to say, report something good, right? So I emailed the chief operating officer, but not everybody
Well,
has
we
her
could
email.
do that here too. But yeah.
You could do that.
Yeah,
Right, but how do you then take this and open it up to all of the riders, right, and say, let's report something good? So,
Yeah, because
in that, right, this, how do we report something good that the operator's doing? So first, maybe you could have a presentation by an operator saying, what's the day in the life of an operator? And then we could bring in somebody from safety, security, and training, there he is, and talk about how the drivers are trained about customer service, and bring you Shelby Harris, our new bus operator whisperer, or what's her actual title?
Manager of coaching.
Manager of
Manager of
coaching,
coaching,
right?
yeah.
And tell you about how drivers who need somebody to talk to and have a bad day and want to improve their customer service get additional coaching.
Yeah.
And then how do we communicate this? And this could all be rolled into Driver Appreciation Day, which happens in March. I mean, there's look at all these ideas.
Well, I think it's more of an informational item though, as opposed to something that this committee would, or the subcommittee, working group, whatever, would take on. And then
Okay.
have an operator come in as one of our informational items.
And information maybe, yeah. Although I think the part you just said, you know, us asking for a scroll on there that gives the driver number, or even just a sign, like, you know, a sign in the buses that this person, J, you know, Gloria L, puts up her little sign when she comes on duty, and her bus says Gloria L.
Right, and
so
that's
you
why
can-
Craig's here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
Craig.
Thank you for
I mean, we've.
So we're all, I mean,
Yeah.
so we got Theo
Yeah.
from Safety, Security, and Training.
Yeah, she was
and
tossing out
Craig.
hints.
Is that's why they're here, so actually, so the little things, even now, what you guys are saying about little ideas could even happen without making it an initiative.
And you're right, and those may be the things that in the member comments at the TRAC meeting too, that we keep reminding people, bring those ideas to the TRAC meeting, because we are in fact the voice of the rider to PSTA.
I have a quick question that
Yes.
has really, I don't know. On the bus today, I noticed that there's a little sign that they have, now they're having a survey for, that you could actually win a bus pass.
Yes.
Again, does that have something to do with everything that we've been talking about communications? Are we getting the bus riders to comment on this?
Well, every year, this survey, so we do a lot of surveys.
Right.
This time of year, we do a survey with the American Bus Benchmarking Group, which is a customer satisfaction survey. So
Yeah, because it doesn't really say anything, and I'm just curious because the fact, oh, there's a survey out there, isn't that interesting? And they're asking riders for, information.
Right.
And I didn't know whether any of the committees get a hold of this so that we can find out what other riders have to say.
Absolutely. So when that survey's done, you could absolutely, so Mary Ann
Right.
was put it
Okay,
on the
yeah,
list of,
sure.
so when the ABBG customer satisfaction survey, we can
Results.
not only tell you what our riders said, but what our peer systems with their riders
Right, because
are
they
saying.
might have a lot of these things on the board that we've been talking about, or that what's been suggested that, it's just not this committee, but there's a lot of people out there that might be,
Sure.
detour or whatever. Okay, thank you.
You got all these ideas
I
down?
know, this is great.
And going back to the driver, it's on the how-tos. We were talking about how do you interact with the driver?
Yeah.
How does the driver interact with you? What
Oh,
should
there
you
go.
expect?
Right, yeah, that what.
What should you expect from the driver and what he should expect?
Okay, yeah, so maybe
It's
that's
in
that
yeah.
item then, it's the how-tos, and that includes the driver interaction, but also how to use the website to get information, or so that marketing can hear what we are finding or not finding in our quests to get the right route for ourselves.
Yes.
So, so I'm hearing 3. Are you hearing?
Well,
Are those the three we?
Well, I'm hearing 3, and I'm wondering if we need to pick the one. The 3 I'm hearing is the one is the starting as the communication of detours, but then a larger communication issue from it.
Mhm.
The second being, shelter issues, and that again becomes communication of how do you keep the system clean. And the third being how-tos in terms of driver interaction or driver issue. Please change
Okay.
anything that I'm saying. I mean,
I have to add something, only because the social media campaign, how we are riders, improving the image of riders, and ultimately, we want more riders, obviously. That's one of our goals. It's a critical goal for the whole agency to increase ridership. And Gloria, way back when, you had just a simple idea of a rider referral promotion. You ride, your friends ride, your coworkers ride, and if you, I don't know how much money it would cost, but your your idea is something that can, if effectively communicated and if there's a marketing campaign for it, we could actually really make a difference and increase riders. In other words, Gloria meets somebody and Gloria says, if I refer you, if you join and get a Flamingo card, I'm gonna get something. I don't know what it's gonna be, okay? But if each and every one of you do it, or we can spread this out, this rider referral promotion, it can be huge, and it doesn't have to cost that much money. But it's also combined with We Are Rider campaign, which Gloria's idea was little video vignettes on our website. It can't cost that much.
I think that it's something some of these that marketing's already worked on.
Oh, okay.
Working
Have
on.
they?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
they're
I mean,
already,
we
they're
have not
working
heard
on, like,
Okay. It's just that I didn't want to
some of
lose
these.
track of the fact that we ultimately also want to
Increase
help the
ridership.
riders, but increase ridership as well.
Sure.
Which, some of the ways of doing that is helping improve the image, which, you know, we did have a campaign recently for our image or our modern transit, but it really wasn't about improving the image.
Or,
So I didn't-
or even improving ridership, and that's one of the things that I think.
Right, I just
you know,
think, I
yeah,
mean, just
no, that's it.
think about that. I think we have to think about two that can be done, but let's not forget about a long-term one that means something to the riders and also means something to the agency.
And we've done campaigns like that, like, why is it important to me?
Right.
Right? Like who are the people who ride, and why is the service important
Right.
to them?
Has it
in their
had
life?
much success?
I'm not.
We can talk about that.
Oh.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we've had like a.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll talk about it later. Success.
Oh.
So are these the three that we're comfortable with, that we think that we're gonna come to a consensus?
I'd like to know what hub-to-hub express is.
That's me, what I was talking about, like traveling, remember, I always give the example of traveling down 19 and going from Tarpon, next stop Countryside, next stop Largo.
Okay, so that would be a presentation by our planning team and probably service development team. And we could talk about
Like express.
some of the things that we're trying to do to create limited stop services.
Right.
But let's do that in the context of the October service change.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
we're
that-
working on
that's
something
really
like
great.
They're
that,
actually working on
like
it.
experimenting with some things that we haven't
Oh, great.
launched yet, but you'll hear about it before. Yeah. And then what was the ramp wheelchair awareness?
I think that was a communication thing also, wasn't that,
Mhm.
Kim, you were talking about, like, not, you know,
Using regular bus, so it was hard for me to use the ramp. They told me that I should have the bus right now.
right, she did not know the regular bus driver
Right.
is responsible for pushing her wheelchair up into the bus.
So just creating awareness and
Well,
letting the
that's
riders and
awareness
bus
for the
operators.
driver, it's awareness for the operator,
And
and,
Exactly.
yeah, and for passengers.
Yeah.
Does
And
that
those
work?
are things that are not necessarily easy to do, but it's something obviously that we can probably do maybe for December, like creating awareness with the drivers, creating awareness with the riders.
We'll just tell Theo.
Just tell them.
And they can send out information memos, behind the driver notices.
Well, I know a lot of the riders can't afford to, because they have trouble getting with their buses. I don't think a lot of the riders know that the drivers need to help them on the regular buses.
And that actually works well for PSTA as well, you know, because my understanding is that, you know, of course, Care Ride costs more for the county and for the riders, for everybody. And so the more that people who are using DART now know that they can get some support using fixed route
And I know
buses.
a lot of people can't afford DART, they don't know that they can use regular buses.
That's-
So
that's-
they don't travel.
Yeah, that's an interesting issue there, that is.
Better quality of life for riders, savings for the system.
Yeah.
And that's what my Care right there was telling me, well, people can't afford care rides, and they can't, and they know that the regular bus drivers need help.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we could put that in, so the public engagement team has a program called the Golden Travelers, and they can put that piece of information into their toolbox for the outreach portion, and then we'll work with safety, security, and training to make sure that that's impressed upon the operators, that what their responsibilities are too.
Because I feel bad, I don't want people to avoid taking buses because they can't afford it.
Sure, absolutely.
Absolutely.
We don't either.
Any other questions on any other of the PSTA improvements? Sir?
Just so many good ideas. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for spending your time.
Oh, do we want to go to that or not?
So if we're looking to choose something to drill down on then,
Yes.
I mean, we were just adding pieces to different things, but I mean, I'm not trying to put any words into anyone's mouth, but again, did we come down to these key ones, the one being talking about communication of detours, but then how that translates to communication of any of service changes or any kind of communication between riders and PSTA. The second being shelter issues, and that being how, again, communication, but how do we communicate to you that shelters need to be cleaned up, and how is that handled? Us learning how is that handled. And then the third was, I had wrote down in terms of driver interaction, and again, education for us in terms of what's involved with them, but also, is it a system whereby we have a way of a much more orchestrated way for riders in general to send messages about good, even if they when on the announcements, if they go, having a good experience on this ride, call this info line or text this number, and
I think it says it already.
I
I've
just-
heard it say it before.
Yeah, there's one out there.
Yeah.
is it really? I've not seen it. Oh, no, it does. It said, if you had a good experience, call it in, but it's like, again, you don't know what to call in, and so it's like, if there's a.
Yeah.
I think it
Okay,
should say
then
the
what-
info line at 727-540-1900 or.
I think what she's saying, she doesn't know, over in Hart, it put up the operator number or the
Operator
bus number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we need an
So
operator
just
number.
knowing the details as to, you need the bus with the bus number, the bus route, which direction it was heading, what day and what time. So those are the things you currently need to give a good commendation to our bus operators.
Right.
Or not so good commendation.
Yeah, thanks.
But,
Today's, May 15th, and driver 274, was rude to me, or, driver 274 was absolutely wonderful and helped me out.
Is there any incentive for the drivers to get compliments?
Oh, for sure.
Are there? Okay.
Yeah.
They get driver of the year, driver of the quarter. They also get
Do they still go to the
Things
board?
like safety awards, driver of
yes.
the quarter, driver of the year, and have, they get a couple days off if they do receive one of those.
Good.
And everybody gets a commendation as part of the board report, so the board of directors sees their name and written up.
Yeah. But I think
We had one of our board members who had such a good experience on the bus that we brought the operator in to celebrate her good customer service. So
Oh,
you
I
never,
remember that.
You never know who
Yeah,
you're gonna
I
have on
remember
your
that.
bus.
That's right,
Yes.
yeah. That's right.
So I think the shelter one, if it's just communication, it could be something where we just bring Henry and he can talk about what he currently does and what are some of the outlets that you guys have, so you can communicate back as far as what shelters are messy and what they need to, when they need to be cleaned.
Yeah, but I think we want to keep this top line, right, for this group, keep it, you have a very specific problem, we'll take care of it. But for this committee, I think we'd like to make sure that it's a strategy discussion, not, or an action item discussion, not a specific complaint session.
Oh, absolutely. So, again, I keep coming back to, so if we have to choose two things, I want to make sure that we are defining what the things are that we're choosing between. Like, we're specifically looking at, this is our project for this session.
I like the detours idea.
I do as well. I mean, I guess one of them is the detours idea. The other is then so the shelter is not, you're thinking shelter is more like just a system for planning.
No,
What
I
we
just
can
mean
do-
like when we talk about it, let's talk about the.
Globally.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. So the second is like a global shelters issue, and it's
like, yes, how do we receive information about shelters and how do we address those comments?
Mhm.
And in fact, that ties to a little bit to our thing about safety, because the shelters are part of that whole thing. A part of the shelter issue may be that it's not even our shelter that's the problem. It may be the sidewalk coming up to the shelter, or where the shelter is located, that you can't, go to Boot Ranch, you get off, there's a shelter there, and I as a wheelchair user cannot safely get into that shopping center at all. I could basically take a bus if I want to be safe, and I can stay at the bus stop, and I can't go anywhere. Boot Ranch is crazy. I can't believe they have safety.
So is everybody happy with what we currently have? You want
What was
to
the
get into a general
Well, the third one I had was the
consensus?
driver issues, driver interaction. What do drivers want to know from us as riders? What do we want to say to drivers? How do we communicate about good and bad drivers? And basically knowledge of the system.
Why don't I do this like house hunters, right? Like
1, 2, and 3.
like, well,
Except we have to
Yeah.
pick two.
pick,
So you can pick-
take one out.
Yeah.
I'll take one
and
out.
you could use this sheet of paper on the back. I know it says 2, so just write down the top 2, and we'll hand these sheets back to me, and then Bob will do the tally, and he'll tell you which ones were the most.
I'll tell you which my two favorite are.
Which are your two favorites?
I'd like to know, just from conversation,
Yeah.
if there's one that speaks more to you than the others, and that way we could prioritize these as well.
Yeah, to me, it's communications, just in general. Better communication with riders, like almost use us like the Flamingo testers are doing with the beta testers. Like maybe some of the strategies to communicate better with riders, we could go through us first, see if that works. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be like that, but I'd just prefer that, and then we could work on detours, whatever, just broader, but just communications. When you're standing there and you just don't know what's going on, like when I first started taking transit, we didn't have, you couldn't call in the numbers, and that was the worst, just standing there at the bus
Not
stop.
knowing.
Yeah, like I'm taking the 20, it's once an hour, did I miss it? Am I gonna be standing there for 55 more minutes? So, I mean, like, that communication with me has like made such a huge difference, and really has made me a much more frequent transit user than anything else. So mine would be communication.
I think, as Cassandra said earlier, though, it's easier once we're doing it in the context of a certain thing where we have a specific, actionable goals versus just like communication. Because that's very big.
And we were saying that like that whole issue of detours as being sort of as a prototype for exactly, because I agree about communication. I think if in the end of this we come away with a treatise that, for lack of a better term,
Nice. Nicely done.
but basically,
Triple words for.
oh, stop. No, but something where it is. So it's a platform that says that this is what we as riders want, with communication with PSTA, and PSTA saying to us, okay, riders, here's the things that we're giving you that are the tools.
Right, but what I'm hearing Richard say is about my ride, right? Specifically about when the bus is coming and why it does or does not come, or
Yeah.
if it's doing something differently than it normally does.
Yes,
So
yes.
Specific on-the-fly information. So we can take that and then start talking about how do we communicate those and use the detours as an example of
Yes.
what happens behind the scenes, and then what happens, what do riders see, and is that enough?
Right, and then have you all
Right.
see what we
Okay.
experience with those systems that are supposed to be
Like,
working a certain
Right,
way.
do you see that in transit
I-
now? Do you, do you get a
I
text?
love
Do you
this.
do I have to opt in, do I have to opt out? How do we communicate that opt-in, opt-out to riders? Yeah, I think that will work.
Okay, I think it covers that.
But if that's the one that you all think is, the
That-
priority, then we can get started on that one first.
Yeah, that's what they were.
And then secondly, and then choose, and then you can choose
Then
your
it's sort
second.
of between shelter issues and driver issues. I think, you know, what Mary Ann was saying about the whole issue of, the actual rider issues, to me, that's a huge thing, but I don't think that it's going to happen in this context. And so the image of the riders and that, that's sort of my pet one, but I don't see that having the teeth.
Well, and just because you don't pick the third one as one of your top two, doesn't mean we can't get to it if we've got,
Or
as the
next
next,
year
as the
or
next
whatever.
thing,
Yeah.
right?
Right. All right, so how do you want to tally this? Are we, we're
Bob's
writing it
tallying,
down?
yes. You're writing it down in the back of
Oh, where's my?
your PowerPoint.
You get to vote.
I get to vote too? Oh, yeah.
This isn't a vote, this is a consensus recommendation.
Yeah, I
On paper.
Okay. I think that.
And I think you've come up with 3 really good ones, so if it's all right with you as far as consensus building, we'll keep whichever one is the third one, we'll just keep as,
Well, we'll keep it as an alternative.
yeah. as an
Just in
alternative.
case.
Thank you. So we'll just, came up with 3 consolidated ideas and we're just prioritizing them. Is that how you're voting? Okay.
Okay. I stuck one on there, it's
Put
not
1 and 2
technically the
letter.
third, but that's, so that, just so that, but just
Okay,
as a
there you
vote
go.
for that.
So it gets a
Because, yeah, Mary Ann brought it
Yeah.
up, and I agree with her,
Yeah.
but I think in this context, we're not gonna do it.
1. Thank you.
All right, so as soon as our computer gets done processing all the information.
Oh, who's our
So
computer?
you want to-
Bob's our computer?
Yeah. Yes.
So just carry on.
Mary Ann's got
Okay.
something
To hand out to
to
you.
hand out. She'll be like all of 7.5 minutes.
Nice.
No timing.
9.5, is that what you said? No.
So one of the conversations that Gloria and I had was about learning how you guys get information. Because it would be interesting for, I guess, us in the outreach department knowing how you receive information, whether it's your cell phone, news, the website, newsletter, emails. That would be very important because it'll help us create efficient outreach or just different ways that we can communicate to our riders. That's something that we think is interesting for us to really work on.
I think we've talked about this, who oversees the website right now? Is that marketing that does it?
The marketing
Is there
department,
a
yes.
person there? Because, I mean, I would love to talk with them, because for me personally, I don't find that the website works as well as it used to, because the trip planner is not front and center. But I don't know if other people agree, but that, to me, that is part of the whole communication. I'd like to have that, whoever handles that, come and talk to us as well.
That could be another session. That's-
Yeah, because that to me, that's another way. I mean, I tend to be a website user more than anything. I'm not as much of a Twitter, I mean, I have it, but I don't use it. But I will go to the website all the time to try to do a trip planner. And I would look for announcements there if they were there.
We'll definitely talk to the marketing department and see if they can come out.
I think the marketing department ought to be involved with a number of these things that we're talking about, because communication that's what they are. I mean, you are too, but of course.
I think the detours, they play an important part just because almost all that information goes to the website.
So one of the things that we'll actually be bringing to you next month that the public engagement team is working on is the public engagement strategic plan. And as part of that plan, we have a role that the public engagement team plays, which is more of that personal interaction, right? The relationship building. And then you have the marketing team, which is more mass media, more like global information. And so both need to be involved in different projects and programs depending on what tool we're using in order to connect with people. So a lot of the ones that you're talking about, like if you receive a text message, that's through the marketing department. Social media is through the marketing department. But you want a presentation on how to ride, and that's public engagement. You do a survey on a particular bus route to see how we can make improvements, that's public engagement. So it creates a two-tiered system for what we're just the level of information we're trying to get.
Oh, okay. What I missed the tally, what was the tally?
No, we didn't. I'm sorry.
There- He's holding them hostage with the information until you get that.
I'm ready. Do you want to type them in?
Okay, no, well, this can wait.
Or do you want to just?
No, just go ahead.
Okay.
He's done, go.
There's a bit of a hiccup.
Is that a hiccup?
Uh-oh.
We got a
Yes.
tie?
What's going on?
The first one, there is a tie.
Really?
Oh, wait a minute, I can't.
Recount.
Recount.
Price Waterhouse strikes again.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. How could there be a tie if there's 9 people?
Write-ins and lack of write-ins.
Okay, all right,
Ah.
fair
The
enough.
first one, though, overwhelming, was detours, communication.
Okay.
2 M's.
No.
All right, proofreader.
Behind that, we had a tie for clean shelters and a separate, just plain communication. So would you like to just write the communication into detours communication?
Yes.
That would be 1, and then shelters 2.
Okay, fair enough.
Just making sure.
Easy enough.
And so drivers was basically a
Well, there were other people who
Who's
asked
there?
when they were in there. You know, we had some
But-
videos, social media, there were different opinions, but these two were the
Okay,
consensus.
so these are the 2, and then if we have extra room at some point, we'll add others.
Just because these are the 2 consensus doesn't mean we still can't.
Right,
because
so
we
I
need
would,
a driver
when
to
we talk about these, it would, maybe frame them, in the conversation, maybe I would frame them as questions, right? And the first one being, how do we communicate changes in the system, right? Like immediate changes in the system to riders, like detours. And then secondly, how do riders help us keep our amenities clean, right? And that's the interaction part of why this committee is taking on this issue.
By the way, this is interesting. Elizabeth, you'll appreciate this. I noticed I was at Park Street Terminal and they have a breathe easy zone. Yeah, right, people. They were not. But it's like, how do I, as a rider, say to another person who's waiting in line, excuse me, ma'am, you need to go over and stand in line. And I'm not a non-afraid person, but I was like, I don't think I'm gonna have the
I
guts
have
to
a
say
solution to the problem.
Pretend the call.
I move away from the shelter. I create the distance.
Yeah.
Because you can't.
I was waiting in
I
line
can answer
for a
that for
bus.
you. We always have a guard on duty. Go ahead and talk to the guard and let him know. It is a soft, it's not, like we're gonna put someone in prison or anything, but the guard will go up and talk to them and let them know, without revealing that it came from you.
Oh,
In Grand Central, they go across the street.
Yeah, they do. At Grand Central, they do.
They go across the street to.
They won't go to the breathe easy zone because okay, so Grand Central's a big circle.
Yeah.
Or my bus is on the complete opposite side of the breathe easy zone. So if you're sitting over there waiting for 5 or 79 or one of the buses on that side, it's easier for them to just go onto the sidewalk over by the old bank parking lot and stand there.
Well,
Because then they can see when their bus comes in.
well, let them. Yeah, that's fine, as long as they're not breathing.
They're not on the black
Not
seats, I don't
breathing
care.
on me.
How are you wrapping it up?
No, I think that we did good. I think detours is a great one to start with, and then we have shelters.
Yeah.
So I know that that's very important for a lot of our riders, especially when it's raining or it's extremely hot out there. Making sure that those shelters are usable and they're clean.
So what do we do next then?
So the next step is for us to go and talk to the separate departments, and they will come. Would they be here in the next June meeting?
Well, it depends. What else
Yeah,
is
let's
on-
look at the agenda and let's create a month-by-month action plan of what we're gonna do,
Right.
and what we're gonna bring to these folks. Would you like to take this to the June committee as a recommendation, or just go ahead and get started?
I think we should just get started. I mean, that's why we have a committee. I don't think we need to get the full.
Okay,
if
fair
it's-
enough.
We've got almost a quorum here.
So
I think,
let's,
Just a clarification on the shelters, it's just about communication between PSTA and riders?
No, clean shelters.
clean
Clean
shelters.
shelters.
It's about-
No,
it's
invite
about how do we
Henry.
keep shelters clean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
okay.
Henry Lucasic and
Right.
maintenance.
So, we'll go back and we'll talk to
Henry and marketing and.
first marketing and transportation
Yes.
to talk about, to get together a presentation of how do we, what are the current resources that we use? Like, when a detour happens, let's start at the very beginning, say, when we have to do a detour, who decides? How do they decide? How do they communicate that internally? And then how do we communicate that externally? Right? And what tools does marketing use in order to communicate that? And then we can have a conversation with you all about, well, does that work or not work?
That's exactly right, because then, yeah, the other side is that, you know, when if you're making these changes or you're doing it this way, we want to be the beta testers of the communication in a sense.
So I think we're gonna have to talk to operations and have operations tell you what happens internally, right? And then say, okay, here's the point where they get the handoff to marketing, and this is how marketing then takes it from there. Does that sound all right? Okay.
It sounds good.
So call Jeff.
Call Jeff and
Call Cindy.
Cindy.
Yeah, and make sure they put together a presentation for June.
Yeah, and in June, we can tell them that, you know,
June
one,
20th.
you can start it by saying, you know, we chewed up all, you know, these different ideas, and these are the ones that the committee decided on, and this is where we're beginning with this procedure.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for having such great ideas and, you know, contributing to the whatever list we had here of 15 different things. And it's not easy to narrow it down to 2 or 3. It's very difficult, but we'd like to thank you, and we'll probably have a presentation for you in June. That'll give you a little bit more information.
And no more workshops.
Oh, there's no more workshops. But Marianne has a
Okay.
little.
Yes, there was a slight
update?
there was a slight communication breakdown. I actually asked for 20 of these, and I ran down so fast, I thought it was more than it was, but we are sponsoring, as we always do, the St. Pete Pride Parade, and they're calling for volunteers. And here's the information of the parade. Oh my gosh, there's no date on the parade. Okay.
It's my birthday, June 23rd.
Yeah.
They're having a parade on
First
the.
thing they have to do.
parade
is
for
put
you.
the
On your
date
birthday?
on
But a parade on the Queen's birthday.
Action item.
Huh?
You're
They
on the
should put the
23rd,
date
I'm
on
on
the
June
poster.
27th.
Oh, really?
You must be
However,
cancer then, right?
Yeah.
There will also be, and it doesn't say it on here, there's a special plan that marketing is discussing.
Hold on, you gotta see my picture for my Kentucky Derby party.
What
I don't think I'm.
Exactly figured it out, but disabled volunteers. Okay, I'm sure, so
Oh,
whoever
don't worry,
doesn't,
you know what, give me
I
that,
can
send
email
it to me electronically, yeah, that's good.
whoever doesn't get one, I promise you, and also I think they should put the date of the parade.
No, sorry, they're having it on the parade one for my.
good.
No, I'm not. I've already got plans.
So, there'll actually be a revised version of it, so.
My niece does it, marches it in every year.
What did you tell them that's funny? It's funny. It's like,
She's a dancer and the, bring that up.